Fundamentals of Personal Success by Jim Rohn. Character isn't something you were born with and can't change, like your fingerprints. It's something you weren't born with and must take responsibility for forming. If you don't make plans of your own, you'll fit into someone else's plans. And what do you think they have planned for you? Not much. All the possibilities of greatness, great wealth, great reputation, great satisfaction, come if you turn your attention from yourself to others. A courageous person is not someone who never feels fear, but who fears the right thing at the right time in the right way. Forging your character. Personal success is built on the foundation of character, and character is the result of hundreds and hundreds of choices you may make that gradually turn who you are at any given moment into who you want to be. If that decision-making process is not present, you'll still be somebody, you'll still be alive. But you may have a personality rather than a character, and to me, that's something very different. Character isn't something you were born with and can't change, like your fingerprints. It's something you weren't born with and that you must take responsibility for forming. There used to be a joke about football teams that lost every game. The coach would say, "We built a lot of character this year, didn't we?" As if character is something that you settle for when you haven't achieved what you really wanted, or automatically develops as a result of adversity. I don't buy that. I don't think adversity by itself builds character, and I certainly don't think that success erodes it. You build character by how you respond to what happens in your life, whether it's winning every game or losing every game, or getting rich or dealing with hard times. You build character from certain qualities that you must create and diligently nurture within yourself, just like you would plant and water a seed or gather wood to build a campfire. You've got to look for those things in your heart and in your gut. You've got to chisel away in order to find them, just like chiseling away rock to create the sculpture that has previously existed only in the imagination. But the really amazing thing about character is that, if you're sincerely committed to making yourself into the person you want to be, you'll not only create those qualities, you'll strengthen them and recreate them in abundance, even as you're drawing on them every day of your life. That's why building your character is vital to becoming all that you can be. Character versus charisma. Charisma is a word that is often confused with character, but charisma is really quite different. Charisma is derived from a Greek word meaning an ability to elicit favor in other people. It's a magnetic quality of personality that people respond to as if it were magic. Charisma is almost like a magic wand that confers power over others. Character has a very different origin. Character comes from a Greek word meaning chisel, or the mark left by a chisel. Of course, a chisel is a sharp steel tool used for making a sculpture out of a hard or difficult material, like granite or marble. So in its origins, the word character isn't related to charisma, which is described as a kind of magic wand. Character isn't a magic wand, character comes from chisel, and I hope you'll remember that. You've got to chisel your character out of the raw material of yourself, just like a sculptor has to create a statue. The raw material is always there, and everything that happens to you, good or bad, is an opportunity for building your character. Let me point out another important distinction between character and charisma. In both its definition and its derivation, character doesn't refer to other people. It doesn't refer to having power over other people, getting other people to follow you, or gaining favor with other people. Character is something that you have, and something that you are. You could be marooned on a desert island and your character would still be important. In fact, it would likely be very important in that situation, but charisma wouldn't do you any good at all. Charisma requires the presence of others, while character is all about you. Character is the person you are after you've chiseled and have gotten past all the unnecessary material to what's underneath. But since we're usually surrounded by other people, let me be a little more specific about how the differences between a charismatic person and a person with character can play out in the real world, particularly in leadership situations. Here are 4 sets of circumstances that can easily occur. First, a really charismatic person can make people believe there's pie in the sky or that the sky is going to fall tomorrow, one just as easily as the other. By creating these expectations, charismatic individuals can indeed energize and inspire others, or terrify and demotivate them until the overblown scenarios are proven false and the charisma runs out. But a person of character doesn't need to be anyone's Pied Piper and isn't comfortable in that role. Instead, he or she looks within for the true source of inspiration and energy. Second, a charismatic person can inspire devoted or even fanatical loyalty, but this can all too easily turn into an unconscious sense of dependency that can make matters difficult when the leader is no longer available. A charismatic coach is effective during the glory years, but when he leaves the organization, there's a sense of abandonment, and the team may never achieve anything like its prior success. Powerful personalities often resist delegating authority, but it's an attribute of character for a leader to refrain from making himself or herself the indispensable heart and soul of an organization. Here's a third difference between character and charisma that's particularly important in a leadership situation. Charismatic people have to keep pulling rabbits out of the hat. The magic of their presence has got to keep expressing itself, or people might start wondering where it went. Worse yet, they might start getting bored. During the Second World War, Dwight Eisenhower was picked to command the Allied forces in Europe not because he was an exciting leader with a sense of high drama, but precisely because he wasn't. There were plenty of charismatic individuals around, such as Churchill, Montgomery, de Gaulle, and Patton. What was needed was somebody with toughness, stamina, and the ability to manage people. Just before the Normandy invasion in 1944, Eisenhower met with a group of officers who would be going into battle. He stretched out a piece of string on a table and pulled it a few inches with his finger. "An army is like this piece of string," he said. "If you try to push it from behind, it just tangles and doubles back on itself. Soldiers have to be led from the front, not pushed from behind." Eisenhower may not have been colorful, but he could definitely get his point across in a way anyone could understand. He had character in the true sense. One of the biggest pitfalls for a charismatic leader comes from his or her ability to inspire love and devotion, and this is the last point I want to make. To bask in the warm glow of a leader's approval, people may become reluctant to voice disagreements. There are people who become isolated because subordinates are afraid of them, but the same isolation can occur as a result of misplaced affection. People of character are usually well loved by everyone around them, but they make it clear that their own first love is for the truth, even if it hurts. And that's not a bad reputation to have. Positive self-direction. When you are a person of character, you know who you are and where you want to go. You've already spent a great deal of time thinking about it. You've been working on the parts of your personality that will make you better, your attitude, your health, your time management skills. You've been putting it all down on paper. And you've developed positive self-direction. As you talk with yourself every day, how often do you ask, is what I am doing today getting me closer to where I want to be tomorrow? Because here's what you don't want to ever do: kid yourself. Kid your neighbor and kid me and kid the marketplace if you want to, but don't kid yourself. You can't wait around with your fingers crossed hoping you'll arrive at a good destination when you're not even headed in the right direction. You say, well, maybe the wind will take me. There's a chance, of course, but it's about as likely as winning the lottery. You've got to take charge. Ancient scripture says that hope, if it's delayed long enough, can make the heart sick. You've got to ask yourself, often, am I performing the disciplines that are taking me in the direction that I want to go? I don't want to delude myself and think I'm on the way to financial success when there's not a prayer. I don't want to delude myself into thinking there's someone else who will take care of it. Nobody else is going to take care of it. Nobody else is going to take care of me. What if all of your negative thinking relatives turned positive? What would that do for your fortune and your future? Not much. If prices came down a little, what would that do for your sophistication and your culture? Not much. If the economy gets a little better, what would that do for you? Not much. If you don't make plans of your own, you'll fit into someone else's plans. And what do you think they have planned for you? Not much. Most people wake up every morning counting on this not much list. And that's all they have, not much. Not much hope. Not much promise. Not much progress. They're driving what they don't want to drive, living where they don't want to live, doing what they don't want to do. Forget the thief waiting in the alley to snatch your purse. What about the thief in your mind? He is tempting you to become lazy, not stimulated by thoughts and questions. Don't become a victim of yourself. Ask yourself these questions. Is this the direction that I want for my life? Is it someone else's direction? Is it a goal that has been ingrained in me since my childhood? Is it my parents', my spouses', my bosses', or my children's? Is it mine? Ask yourself these questions. Get into the debate of your inner mind. What am I doing that works? What am I doing that doesn't work? Debate it all. Work with your mind to figure out the best possible direction for you. This is your self-direction, finding your own way. There are two parts to positive self-direction. Part 1 is self-knowledge. Self-knowledge is knowing who you are and what you want to do with your life. It is knowing how you feel about yourself. Self-knowledge has a lot to do with Your philosophy, and your philosophy has a lot to do with shaping your attitude. It helps determine how you feel about yourself, about life, about your direction, and about others around you. You've got to gather up enough knowledge and information to know what's right for you. How do you gather up this information? Well, you can start with your own experiences. The best way to know if something works for you, to find the right way, is to do it the wrong way. You can't keep doing it the wrong way. You've got to be smart enough to say, hey, this isn't working, and change it. Start doing it the right way. Then search for the knowledge and apply what's right for you to your life. Develop your own attitudes and philosophies around your own experiences and the experiences of others. Take all of the information you have gathered and compile it, consider it, debate it, tear it apart, turn it upside down. Look at it from your own perspective and refine it to suit you. Rearrange it. Throw some of it out. Keep what you think will work for you. And most importantly, make sure that what you end up doing is the product of your own conclusion. Make sure that the knowledge that you are building is your own self-knowledge. The second component of positive self-direction is preparation, being ready for the opportunities when they show up in your life, being ready for the sales call that may make you a fortune. Being ready for the meeting may positively affect your career, being ready for it all, in the expectation that it will come. For those of you who are parents, when you found out that a new member of the family was going to come along in 9 months or so, what did you do? You started getting ready. You started reading the books on how to best handle a baby. You started buying everything you needed to care for the baby. You started asking advice from friends and relatives who've already had a baby or two. You asked questions, defined your parenting style, got ready for a major change in how you live, the hours you keep, and the financial obligations you have to live up to. You started getting ready. Preparing for your own life is pretty much the same. With enough planning, dedication, and hard work, you'll meet your goals. You know that it will be tough for the first few years, but the sacrifice is well worth it. In the meantime, you've got to be ready for it. If you wish to be ruler over many, you've got to be faithful with few. If you wish to have power and influence over many, be the leader of many, and get the return from many, be faithful and disciplined when there are just a few. And do it in your own enlightened self-interest, because that gives you the best chance to have power, influence, and a place or honor among the many. Be faithful when there are just a few. Someone says, if I had a big organization, I'd really be on top of things. But I've just got a few employees, and I don't know where they are. Come on. When you've just got a few employees, you should know where all of them are. Let's say we were interviewing the parents of a fairly large family whose children have all grown up and gone. What if we said to them, what happened to all of your children? And they answered, I don't know, they just all wandered off. We'd ask, well, where did they all go? If they say, who knows? They're just all gone. We're just going to have some more. That's clearly not an acceptable attitude. If you've got a few employees, if you've got a few distributors, if you've got a few people you deal with, that's the time to sharpen your communication skills. Of being in touch, getting prepared, giving the most of your heart and soul. In your own enlightened self-interest, give it your all when there's a few. Be totally absorbed when there's just a few. Improve your reputation and skills so when a leadership position opens up, you'll be called. The same thing goes with your money. Someone says, "Oh, if I had a fortune, I'd really take good care of it. But I've only got a small paycheck and I don't know where it goes." Nobody would ever respond to the person who says I don't know where it all goes, with "Oh, we'd love to have you run our company." Or, "You don't know where it all goes, wow. You should be in charge of the world. Come on." Positive self-direction means paying very close attention to every dollar you have, really keeping track of where they come from and where they go. Create discipline when the amount is small, and you'll be on your way to handling your money when the amount is large. Be ready for tomorrow by doing all that you can today. That's positive self-direction. Enlightened self-interest. Enlightened self-interest leads to wealth. Selfish self-preservation leads to poverty. Somebody says, "I can't be concerned about other people, I can only be concerned about myself." Well then, you'll always have to be concerned about yourself. Somebody says, "I can't be concerned about other people's bills. I've got enough worries trying to pay my own." Well then, you'll have to worry about them for the rest of your life. The best way to get that monkey off your back is to turn your attention to other people. Once I understood this perspective, it revolutionized my whole life. Self-interest is necessary, of course. But here's what self-interest must be if you truly want to be happy: it must be enlightened. Don't keep your attention only on yourself if you want your life to work out well. All the possibilities of greatness, great wealth, a great reputation, great satisfaction, come only if you turn your attention from yourself to others. In your own self-interest, be enlightened. Truly act in your own self-interest by making an investment in service to others. If you wish to receive, you must give. Some people say, if you give, it's gone. That's not true if you're educated. If you're foolish, yes, it's gone. But if you're enlightened, chances are, if you give, you've invested. What do we expect in investment to do? We expect it to return multiplied, bigger, greater, better. When I was young, my father taught me an important lesson. He said, "Son, always do more than what you get paid for." Some individuals might argue with that. They say, "No, you're going to mess up the whole program." I know they're wrong. In my own self-interest, I did what my father taught me. I always did more than I got paid for. Why? To make an investment in my future. And it's paid off for me. If you're wanting that big promotion, you can't go up to your boss and say, "Just give it to me. I'll work harder if you just give me that promotion." It doesn't work that way. You've got to do more in your current position to get noticed. You need to stand out from everybody else. That way, your boss will say, "You know, we've got this position opening up, and I think we should give it to Nancy. She does so much more than we expect. Just imagine what she'll do if we give her this promotion." You've got to do more than you're paid for. It's an investment in your future. It's one thing to make a sale. If you make a sale, you'll make a living. If you go beyond making the sale by providing exceptional service, keeping in touch, calling your clients before they call you, writing thank you notes, sales will lead to multiple sales. You can make a fortune if you take good care of the customer. People who are well taken care of will open doors you can't get through by yourself. All of us have found ways to make a living. What was interesting for me early on was to figure out ways to make a fortune. You may say, well, Mr. Rohn, how could I deserve to make a fortune? It's easy. Render fortunes of service. People will do things you cannot believe for those who give them good service. Here's one of the greatest gifts you can give anybody, the gift of attention. In return, they will do extraordinary things for your career. They will take you by the hand and lead you to more people than you could meet by yourself. Always do more than you get paid for. You see, life responds to deserving, not need. Life was not designed to give us what we need. Life was designed to give us what we deserve. Once you understand that principle, your life will change. The ancient law does not say this, if you need you will reap. It doesn't work that way. A lot of people out there are hoping it works that way, but it doesn't. The ancient law says this, that if you sow, if you plant, you will reap. Somebody says, well, I really need to reap. Then you really need to plant. Your own self-interest needs to be educated in how to plant. You must know how to do it so everybody wins, because life just doesn't respond to need. You can't go to the soil and say, I need a crop. The soil just smiles at you and says, don't bring me your need, bring me some seed. Bring me some effort. Bring me some discipline. Bring me some interest. Bring me some service. Bring me these things, and I'll return them to you multiplied. You can't come with need. You've got to come with seed. You've got to come with willingness. You've got to come with skills. You've got to be willing to learn, to change, to grow, to make an effort. You must be willing to stand up to the bad weather, to pull out the weeds, to nurture. That's the only way you serve others. And that's the only way you get a return. Everybody wins with enlightened self-interest. Your self-appreciation inventory. In many ways, you are already a tremendous success. And it's important to take the time to appreciate what you've accomplished on the path to becoming all you can be. So I'd like you to take a self-appreciation inventory. Ask yourself a few questions. Start with, what have I achieved in the last 4 days, the last 2 weeks, the last 6 months, the last year, the last 10 years? What have I achieved during these time periods? Write the answers down. Take a self-appreciation inventory of all you've done, and all you've accomplished and all you've become. Take inventory of yourself. Then compare this list to your goals. Have you accomplished all you set out to do? In the last 4 days, 2 weeks, 6 months, 1 year, and 10 years? Compare your lists. Maybe you've been so busy trying to reach your goals that you haven't taken the time to sit back and reflect on what you've achieved already. Look back at your list and say, wow, I really have been through a lot. I really have learned a lot. Look what I've done. Look what I've become. I wasn't like this 10 years ago or even 1 year ago. Look at me. I'm doing okay. Building personal success takes little steps. You need to focus on one step at a time, 1 day at a time, 1 week at a time. It's like taking your family to a reunion where people haven't seen your kids for a year. They say, look how you've grown. You know your kids have grown, but when you see them every day, it's hard to notice. So write down all your accomplishments and see where you've been and what you've done and who you've become. You'll say, look how I've grown. Here's the next question in your self-appreciation inventory. What could I have achieved that I didn't? Be honest now. This is your own inventory. Nobody else has to see it. What could you have achieved over the last week, the last month, the last quarter, the last year? What could you have achieved that you didn't? Would a game plan have made a difference? Would a different direction have made a difference? Would greater preparation have made a difference? Would more discipline have made a difference? Would time management have made a difference? Ask yourself, what could I have achieved that I didn't? Now take this one step further with the question, what do I want to achieve in the next 4 days, the next 2 weeks, the next 6 months, the next year, the next 10 years? This all falls in line with your goals. What you could achieve has to fall in line with what you want to achieve. And through the proper disciplines practiced every day, the what could I do will naturally match up with what do I want to do. Here's another question. What can I do to achieve my goals that I'm not doing now? What things do you need to work on that you're not working on now? Remember, it's easy to do the little things every day. It's also easy not to do them. Are you appreciative of the progress you've made so far? It's important that you take time out to acknowledge yourself and your achievements. Consider where you've been and who you've become. Self-appreciation is a stage in personal evolution that demonstrates maturity and resolve. It comes from already being firmly set on the course of positive self-direction. You know you're on the right track, and you have a wonderful blend of humility and self-esteem. You know that you're accomplishing your goals. And you know yourself enough and are confident enough to avoid needless bragging. Self-appreciation also says that you admit there's room for improvement. You know that you're on the right track, but you admit the need for continued growth. You seek out more books, more seminars, more skills, more disciplines, a greater awareness, and a bigger vision. There's always more room to grow. There's always more knowledge to gain, more skills to perfect. We're never done with the education process because education is part of the path to wealth. Education is part of the path to health. Continued education can turn you around if you're headed in the wrong direction. We must never stop learning, growing, and expanding. And we must never forget to take the time to appreciate ourselves for what we have done in pursuit of what we want to become. The true nature of courage. Doing what it takes to achieve personal success is more than an exercise in discipline, it's also an exercise in courage. Just getting through the day, let alone reaching for the stars, requires courage. That's why true courage is a priceless commodity. In examining the true nature of courage, I can't put it any better than the Greek philosopher Aristotle did more than 2,000 years ago. A truly courageous person is not someone who never feels fear, but who fears the right thing, at the right time, in the right way. What does it mean to fear the right thing in the right way at the right time? To find the answer, let's consider some specific sources of fear that many individuals are facing right now. First, many people today are afraid of what might happen to them financially. And it's certainly true that great changes are taking place in the economy that will have a direct impact on the lives of millions of people. I've heard it said that a corporation that employs 10,000 men and women today may only need 1/5 that many within 10 years. Over the last 50 years, whole sections of our society have learned to identify with the corporation that employed them. That corporation provided not only a salary, but also health benefits and the opportunity to create a pension fund that would make retirement possible at age 65 or even sooner. Now that relationship between the employer and the corporation is changing. Much of the work that used to be done by domestic workers can now be done more cheaply overseas, and companies are taking advantage of that, perhaps out of necessity, perhaps simply to fatten the bottom line. In any case, the fear of losing one's job has now reached a segment of the white-collar workforce that's never been faced with it in quite this way. What else are we afraid of? Many people are concerned about their health. They're afraid that they'll get sick because they're not getting enough exercise, or because they're eating the wrong things, or because of chemicals in the environment. In fact, I think people today are even more frightened of these things than they were in the past, when epidemics of disease and poor sanitation were everywhere. Also, with regard to their health, people are afraid of the expenses that might result if they were to become sick or disabled, or of the expenses they might have to bear if this were to happen to a parent or family member. So financial fears and health-related fears are two of our major concerns. But the third thing that I sense really scares people today is a little less easy to categorize. It's kind of a general feeling that things aren't as good as they used to be, that there's been a loss of control at some basic level of our society. There's a sense that one earthquake after another, some large and obvious, some smaller and almost imperceptible, have accumulated to shift the foundation of society, and it's going to keep on shifting toward a result that's anything but good. Keeping in mind our idea that a courageous person is not someone who never feels fear, but who fears the right thing at the right time in the right way, let's ask ourselves if these fears really fit that definition. I think if we look a little deeper, we'll see that what really scares people about these situations is the sense that they're going to be helpless, that all their trust was placed in somebody or something, and now they've been let down and they can't do anything about it. But remember, you're never really helpless. And the sense that you are helpless, or that you might be if certain things were to happen, is what we really ought to be afraid of. We should refuse to accept it. You're never just a victim of circumstances. No matter what happens, you're never without options that can get you back on track. It takes courage to recognize that, because it means accepting responsibility for your own future. I would suggest that we should accept that responsibility. No one is really going to accept it for us, no matter what we may have been led to believe. Let me emphasize that underlying most fear is the fear of helplessness, of being victimized, of being blown around by the winds of fate like a leaf is blown off a tree. But is that really a legitimate way of looking at things? It sounds to me like being afraid of the dark, in which case the best thing to do is get yourself up out of bed and switch on the light. After all, the people who built this country didn't feel helpless when they faced obstacles that we can hardly even imagine today. I'm not saying we should all just gather around the campfire and tell stories about George Washington, but we should realize that every generation has faced insecurities, lived with them, and triumphed over them. It's only in the past 50 years or so that people have come to expect a life without real tough times and real difficulties. But adversity isn't something to fear, it's something to expect, something to prepare for, and something to overcome. The truly courageous person is not immune to fear, but fear plays a different role in his or her life than it does for other people. If you're a courageous person, your fears aren't about what someone might do to you. Your fears aren't about something that might happen to you. Instead, your fears are about not living up to your ideals, about reacting instead of acting, about not taking advantage of the opportunities that are always within reach. A truly courageous person is not afraid of what might or might not happen next week or next year. He isn't afraid to make the most of every moment today. A truly courageous person fears the impulse to dominate other people. She leads by helping others to be their best. A truly courageous person fears doing anything that he or his loved ones might be ashamed of. A truly courageous person fears making appearances more important than realities, making impressions more important than communication, making himself more important than those who are depending on him. But there's one thing a courageous person fears most. Have you ever seen a deer caught in the headlights of a car? The way the deer just stands there as though paralyzed, with the car bearing down? The truly courageous person fears ever getting caught like that. A constant part of his or her life is dedicated to making sure it never happens. In other words, the truly courageous person, as someone once said, fears nothing except fear itself. Facing your fears. Here are a few techniques to help build your courage. Number 1, put all remote possibilities out of your mind. Don't worry about things you have no control over. Don't spend your time thinking about all the bad things that might happen to you. Don't spend your time plotting and planning ways to make sure these things will never happen. Courageous people don't worry about things that are out of their control or things that are unlikely to happen. They concentrate on what they can control. Number 2, face your fears before you start something. Imagine difficult situations before they occur. Make a list of the worst that could happen, and you'll probably see that the situation is not so bad after all. A friend of mine lost everything a few years back: her home, cars, possessions, antiques, art, jewelry, and credit. She lost it all. Now, on her way back up, whenever she's faced with a tough decision, she asks herself, what the worst that can happen? And guess what? She's already been through the worst, and she survived. It's not an issue anymore. You don't have to lose everything to lose that particular fear. But once you face your fear, you can move on. Once you've figured out the worst that could possibly happen, you'll see that you have the inner strength to deal with it if the worst scenario comes about. And here's the best part: if you've looked at the possibilities beforehand, you'll probably never be faced with the situation at all. Why? Because you've already thought it through. By contemplating what might happen, you've charted your course to make sure that it doesn't. Technique number 3, in building your courage, imagine the alternative. Picture in your mind the final result of giving into your fears. Really feel the cost of being ruled by fear, then really feel the benefits of courageously following your ambition. Carefully weigh the two, and see the difference. If you've been invited to address your national sales convention and are scared to death of public speaking, what should you do? You could decline the invitation, knowing full well that your fears are holding you back. Or you could take some classes, read some books, practice in front of a video camera, and see yourself stepping into a whole new league. You'll be accepting the opportunity to gain more notoriety in your field. And you'll be increasing your opportunities for future success. Once again, it's your choice. Be fueled by your fears, or face your fears. It all depends on how badly you want something. It all depends on how you choose to live your life. Do you always want to be afraid of taking the next step, or do you want to build your courage and open the doors of opportunity? I know what my answer would be. The source of wisdom. The Bible tells us that King Solomon was the wisest man in the world, but he was also the richest man. Kings and queens came from all over the world to get Solomon's advice and to admire his riches. In fact, legend has it that Solomon had wives from every nation on earth, and there's no report of any marital disharmony. Not one divorce. Was this a wise man, or what? The Bible also tells us that when Solomon was just a young man living in the court of his father, King David, God told him he would grant him one wish. Do you know what he wished for? He didn't wish for a kingdom. He didn't wish for great power. He didn't wish for good looks, unlimited pleasure, long life, love, fame, or security. That young man asked God to grant him wisdom. And because he only asked for wisdom, God gave him everything else too. The most important difference between you and me and Solomon isn't where or when we were born, or the privileges we have or we don't. The difference isn't in our names, our bank accounts, or our positions. The difference is that Solomon got wisdom by asking God for it. The rest of us must look for wisdom in everything we read, everything we do, and everyone we meet, and most of all, we must look for it in ourselves. It is a quality that we must earn and learn on our own. The wisest man in ancient Greece, the greatest philosopher the world has ever known, was a man named Socrates. In fact, Socrates made wisdom his profession. Philosopher means lover of wisdom in ancient Greek. Because he didn't have another job, people were always asking Socrates, "So, what do you do for a living?" He was definitely smart enough to figure out that he had to have an answer, so he made up his own job title, philosopher. When people asked Socrates, "What is wisdom?" he always gave the same Answer: I don't know. In fact, Socrates never claimed to know much of anything except how to ask questions. And by asking questions, he would prove to other people that they didn't know what they thought they knew. Everybody in Greece agreed that Socrates was the wisest man around. But, unlike King Solomon, the philosopher Socrates didn't have great wealth. The wisest man in Greece was poor. King Solomon managed to run a huge household with many wives and lots of children, and he accomplished this without any discord or unhappiness. But Socrates had no home life at all. The wisest man in Greece was married to a terrible nag, and they had no children. Socrates, the wisest man in Greece, just went to the marketplace every day. He hung around, asked people questions, and hoped to get invited to a banquet so he wouldn't have to go home and face his wife. King Solomon was honored by all the great leaders of his time. But Socrates didn't have any support among the powerful people in his own country. Their sons would go to Socrates and learn what they could from the philosopher, but the powerful families of Athens, the city where Socrates lived, got tired of his questions. They grew exasperated with his influence over the youth of Greece. He was teaching them that nothing is known for certain, so they accused the wisest man in Greece of corrupting their children. Instead of honoring the greatest philosopher who ever lived, the Athenians sentenced Socrates to death unless he would apologize and recant what he had taught. But Socrates didn't recant. He didn't apologize. Socrates cheerfully drank down a cup of poison and just sat there calmly saying goodbye to his few faithful students, asking questions the whole time. Solomon and Socrates, two very wise men, but two very different destinies. Great wisdom is no guarantee of anything, but to those who really care about it, wisdom is its own reward. Socrates could have avoided prosecution as a criminal if he had just said he'd been wrong. You could make a case that agreeing to be executed when you could avoid it by just saying a few words is not very wise. And you'd be right if it were you or me in that position. But it was the right thing to do for Socrates. Because Socrates really knew who he was, and he knew that what gave his life meaning and made it worth living was just the way he had asking of questions and trying to answer them honestly. After all, what would the rest of your life be like if you were to suddenly become dishonest with yourself? Socrates knew who he was and what his life meant, and he understood that even one bit of lip service in his last moments would undo all the good and meaningful questions he'd been asking for more than 70 years. Know thyself was Socrates' motto. He knew himself well enough to realize that he had to drink that cup of poison. And his character was strong enough that he was actually able to do it. He achieved personal success in his own way. I wish you the same satisfaction of achievement, and I know your story will have a much happier ending. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for content like this.